So as we move into chapter 15, we start to really see the rise of secular music. This is the end of the Middle Ages, moving into the Renaissance. Ars Nova was an early movement that really kind of propelled us into the Renaissance era. Ars Nova means new art, and we're having this new complexity where we have more freedom of rhythm, meter, harmony, counterpoint. So things are starting to come together here. We're going to talk about secular music. We're going to talk about this poetic form called the chanson. There's the rondo, the ballade, and the virelai. And these are all different poetic forms that are put to music. Machaut is our composer that's going to be featured in the late Middle Ages. He's French, and he wrote this interesting enigmatic piece that really has to do with the end is my beginning and the beginning is my end. So he makes this piece kind of a puzzle. And this is the beginning of what we might call word painting. We'll see if we look at the listening guide for this, we can see here that the music moves back and forth just like the text. Here we're going forward and then the music goes backwards in something called a retrograde. Now, if you don't hear that in the music right away, I wouldn't feel bad about that at all. This is one of those types or pieces of music that you really have to discover. It really reminds me of a piece of art where the longer you look at a painting, the more you might discover about it. Well, the same thing really happens in this music where the more you listen to it, the more facets you start to discover about it. In this translation, we see my end is my beginning and my beginning is my end. And he's really trying to mirror the words in the music. So we're just going to take a listen to the very beginning of this piece. So we can hear that the music really does move back and forth, and we have some hollow cadences in there. And so to me, the music really does mirror the words. Like I said, it takes quite a bit of listening to really decipher this piece of music. But we're beginning to see the role of word painting, which I'm going to talk to you more about with the English madrigal here coming up. But this is a secular piece. So this is outside of the church, which is why it's in French. In chapter 16, we're going to talk about madrigals. We have both the Italian madrigal and the English madrigal. I'm going to move right over to the English madrigal because I find this piece of music to be more accessible to us. We can actually understand the words because it's in English, and it shows a very clear representation of word painting. But don't forget about the Italian madrigal and Arcadelt. You'll want to go back and listen to that and make sure that you do your reading on this. But secular music is becoming more and more important at this time because of the rise of the middle class. They're looking for a way to entertain themselves and their guests. It's not exactly like they can just go out for a night at the movies. So this is the way that they are expressing themselves and actually their culture at this time, especially with the idea of courtly love, which I will be talking about when we're listening to this English madrigal here. Okay, so here we are with a listening guide to the John Farmer piece, Fair Phyllis. And like I said, I really like this piece. First of all, it's really refreshing that it's in English. We can understand the words. And the word painting here is very clear. Now, this is an extremely important idea in the Renaissance. They wanted to reflect the music and the words together. So they're really working in harmony with one another. When we hear the beginning of this piece, we actually hear one singer singing the opening line, "Fair Phyllis I saw sitting all alone," to emphasize the fact that she's indeed sitting all alone. So let's take a listen to this. So there we can hear that we had to have the one singer emphasizing that she's sitting all alone. Now, as the tune goes on, I'm going to go to the section where we have up and down. Her lover is actually looking for her and can't find her, so he's searching up and down and up and down. And we can actually hear that within the music. The music actually moves up and down along with the words. As we near the end of the piece, he finds her. And when he finds her, the music actually slows down because he takes the time to kiss her. So that is also portrayed here near the end of the piece. Now, the other thing that this piece of music portrays is the idea of courtly love. At this particular time in history, this was in full bloom. It was more of unrequited love. It was really not meant to be that Fair Phyllis did fall down kissing. It was the thought of Fair Phyllis falling down and kissing her lover, because this was enchanting to the people of the day. Unrequited love was just a part of their society, and it was something that was put in many a song, and was just part of their culture. It was very fun, very flowing, very interesting. It could be happy and upbeat like this, or it could be, you know, you're never going to be able to love me, therefore I'm going to die. So we had both ends of the spectrum here, but courtly love, and the idea of unrequited love, was in most all of these songs at this time. And this is, of course, always in the secular genre. So make sure that you're aware and that you know these song forms, the chanson and the madrigal. And they could be in French, and then we have the Italian madrigal, and then the English madrigal. And most all of these subject matters are either going to be love or pastoral, which would be kind of a countryside type of setting. So just be familiar with that. Now, as we move on to chapter 17, we're going to be talking about Renaissance sacred music. Most, or no, all of the music at this time was written in what we call a cappella, unaccompanied voices. There was an edict set down by the Catholic Church from the Council of Trent, so you need to make sure that you read about this, that said, you know, music for the church is really becoming too complex. We have Martin Luther, who has taken on he's just gone from the Catholic Church and formed his own Germanic church. So in order to keep our constituents happy, we need to make sure that they are actually happy worshiping. And if they can't understand the words to the music, they're not going to be very happy. So the music was completely changed over to being all in Latin, making sure that we can understand the words. There's no more instruments. So music has really changed from what the Ars Nova was just maybe 100 years ago, where there was this blossoming of all these new ideas, but the new ideas were never streamlined. So the church decided to take that upon themselves to streamline these different ideas. Now we're going to come up with two different main types of sacred songs. One is called the motet. Right here, this is a shorter sacred song. It could be within the Mass, and the Mass is the larger, bigger grouping of songs. But the motet is a smaller sacred song, and that's what we're going to discover first. And the composer that we're going to talk about is Josquin. And Josquin is French. He was born in France, moved to Italy, spent most of his life there, and then returned to France at the end of his life. We're now going to move on to sacred music of the Renaissance. And we're going to talk about two different types of pieces of music. The first one being the motet. And this is going to feature Josquin. He's our composer of the early Renaissance. And like I said, this motet is what's going to be featured, which is a shorter religious song. It's all going to be in Latin. And it's not as long as a Mass would be. It could be put within a Mass, but it's just a shorter sacred song. Now, Josquin was French. He was born in the north and actually moved down to Italy where he spent most of his life and then moved back to France at the very end of his life. So he has an interesting history. He has a lot of sacred music where he wrote motets and then he wrote some masses. And then he also wrote some secular music both in French and in Italian. So he has a wide range of different types of musical styles here. Now, what I really want you to know about his music comes at the beginning of this Ave Maria. Like I said, this is a religious song, so it's going to be all in Latin, and it's very different from the English madrigal that we just heard. This piece of music is quite solemn, and it has a completely different feel about it because it is sacred in nature. The beginning of this piece is what I really want you to listen to. We're going to hear something called imitation, where he's taking different voices and they are responding to one another by imitating each other. There are 4 voices here: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. So take a listen to the beginning of this piece. So we can clearly hear that they're moving back and forth, singing the same words and very similar lines of music there. So make sure that you are really listening to that entire piece of music because it explores the idea of the motet, which you're going to, of course, need to know for your quiz. But let's move on to chapter 18 and talk about the Mass and one of my favorite people of all time, and that would be Palestrina. So the musical sections of the Mass, we have 2 different portions here. The Mass is a long piece of music that involves the liturgy of the church. The Mass, the fixed portion of the Mass are these sections in blue here. So you're going to have at least 5 movements in a Mass. And then these over here are going to be variable. They may be in there or they may not, depending on what is needed for that particular Mass. But these 5 sections are always going to be there. So that's important to make sure that you know what those are. And then we're going to talk about Palestrina. I'm going to have to make one more video about him because I can't condense all of this into the next 2.5 minutes. But let's talk a little bit about who he was. Actually, I should probably find the slide for that before I talk too much. So Palestrina is really the composer that responded to the edict from the Council of Trent. Really make sure that you know what that is, where he wanted to make the music as clear and as beautiful and as restrained as possible. And that's what's so beautiful about his music is there's never a single note out of place. And the balance and the symmetry within this music is astounding. It's some of the best harmony that has ever been written, even up till today. Most of the body of his work was indeed sacred music. This Pope Marcellus Mass is what we're going to be listening to, and this is what I want you to take your first inquisitive on, because it's very important that you understand this particular piece of music, because it really is the culmination of all of these hundreds of years that we've been talking about in this unit 2, from the very beginning of 400 AD until now. It's taken us 1200 years to get to the place where harmony and balance is absolutely perfection. So this hallmark style of his, restrained, serene, celestial, being able to understand the words, Palestrina is really the one that took this to the forefront. And so I really want you to spend a little bit of time with this. So we'll continue on with this Mass in the next video.